Is the Torah real or is it parabolic? What should I make of the Torah? This series is going to explore not only how the Torah is real, but the events actually took place in a real understanding, and not only that, how the events that took place are corroborated by historical evidence, scientific evidence, archaeological evidence, and will give you a sense of how these events took place and what we're supposed to understand from them. Welcome to episode 1 of Is the Torah Real? Obviously the answer is yes, and we're going to prove it to you. We're going to have a little introduction here, and I want to just go through a few words. First of all, we're going to be reading it mostly in English. However, when I need to show how the text gets to the translation that I derived at, I will point to the Hebrew. And while you don't need to know Hebrew and you don't need to know ancient Hebrew in order to understand this class, you definitely should understand a basic structure of how language is. Okay, there are 3 ways that ancient Hebrew is different than other languages. Number 1, Hebrew is written from right to left. And the reason why it's written from right to left is because it is a carved language, meaning it's a very, very old language, like Chinese, like a lot of other Semitic languages, like hieroglyphics. And originally, it was actually carved on clay tablets or on stone. That's why it is right to left, because when a person will carve it, he'll hold the pick in his left hand, and his dominant hand is the right hand, and he'll carve that way. Much easier when it's going that way, when it's going right to left. However, we do know that written languages are much easier when they're left to right, because then the ink doesn't smudge on a righty's hand. So lefties have a much better chance of writing in Hebrew. Number 2, it is a Semitic language, meaning it's very similar to other Semitic languages. There are similarities in ancient Hebrew to languages like Babylonian, like Aramean, Aramaic. Arabic is a much, much later language that came derived from other languages. The word structure is based on roots. Now, a lot of modern languages have root structure also, but this is very important because the root, many words will have different roots. Like, for instance, let's give an example. Nachash, which means snake, and Nechash, which means divination. They have the same root. Therefore, there is some sort of connection, possibly, between the word Nachash and Nechash. Even though there are different words, one is a reptile and one is an action, there are similarities. So when we have that, then we could sometimes point that out in the ancient Hebrew. On top of that is that each letter means something. The first letter, Aleph, doesn't just mean the first letter, but it means either an ox or it means a officer. Beit, Beis, that means a house. So in ancient times, language was sometimes derived by single letters. In other words, you wanted to write shorthand, you wrote it based on certain letters. You would say, okay, he's the head of the household. You would basically put a aleph by him and then a beis, and he would be the head of the household, which we get the word av from. Av means father. Aleph beis, head of household. Av. You see how that works? That's how many words are structured. Now, you can have a lot of words where you're going to say, how is that structured? How do I put all these things together and understand the word? It's not always easy to understand. However, in ancient Hebrew, the original and basic words were all made basically because letters each have their own meaning. I'm not going to go through all the letters and all their meanings, but as we get to them, if it's important, I'll let you know. The third and most important thing to understand about ancient Hebrew is that like a lot of other languages, there are possessives in its verbs and adjectives. Let me give an example. In English, you write, I said, he said, she said, they said. Said does not change. So if I told you said, you would just know that someone said something, but you won't know how many people said it. You won't know if a male said it. You won't know if a female said it. You won't know if one person said it. You won't know if 10 people said it, because they said, I said, he said, she said, all the same. However, in Hebrew, that is different, because verbs and adjectives both go by the possessive and by the number, by the plurality. So you have Vayomer, he said. The Umrah, she said. Vayomru, they said. The Omarnu, they said plural female. Amra, she said. Okay, exactly. So that's how it works. So based on that, you could know what the possessive is. I'll give you a very good example. The first verse in the Torah, Bereshis, and we're going to go through what that means. Bereshis, in the beginning, whatever that, we're going to understand what the beginning means, because the next class, we're going to talk about how the Torah proves evolution before science did, and how the Torah and evolution actually corroborate. They are not in contrast to each other. And even so, how it's still possible that the world is not as old as you think it is, even with evolution. We'll explain that in the next class. But right now, it says Bereshis in the beginning, and it says Bara Elokim. Bara means to create. Beis Reish Aleph means to create. Elokim means God. I'm going to refer to God as he, although God does not have any gender pronouns, because the truth is, in ancient Hebrew, he and it, or she and it, are the same thing. So therefore, in Hebrew, if you wanted to say your ride, your car, is very nice, you would not say it, because there is no it. You would use a he. So you can either say it shorthand, Harechev ma'od yafeh, the ride or the car is very nice. Or you could say Harechev hi yafeh ma'od. In other words, you say he means she, but it in feminine is very nice. Same thing with the house is very nice. Habayis ma'od yafa. The house, female, is very nice. And you would say, if you wanted to refer to the house, you would say he, she. Clearly, a house is not a she. A car is not a she. So for God, the ancient Hebrew just has the male possessive. It does not mean he. It means it, male possessive. Why male possessive? Because again, just like a father is a father of a household, and usually kingship is male, so therefore it just, for language purposes, ancient Hebrew put, for convenience, God as a male possessive. So when it says he did, it doesn't mean he did. Really, every time the ancient Hebrew says he did, it really means it did. It, God, it, male possessive, God did. Male possessive, by the way, in ancient Hebrew is just general. When we're talking about many people, men and women, we're going to use the male plural possessive, because we're talking about many people. So the male plural possessive actually could tell you either it's a lot of men doing it or a lot of men and women. For instance, Habonim, the children. They could be sons, Habonim, the sons. It could also be Habonim, the children, and children could be male and female. You could have sons and daughters. That's just the way Hebrew works. So when we refer to God, Hashem, it's going to be male possessive, not because God is a gender. Getting back to the point, Bara Elokim, so therefore, God created. Bara is singular. The word bara means it created. Bara by itself means he or it created. So therefore, Elokim is singular because it means a single thing. If it was plural, it would say Baru Elokim or Elokim Barim. They created. But it's not they created, it's it created. All right. I'm not going to go into any more technical details about how to read Hebrew. We'll get to it when we need to. I just wanted to have that structure. One last final point is that it's very important also in translation to know who did what. God, although God is Echad, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is eternal. The Lord is one. Ein od levado. There is none besides it or him. There is none besides God. However, God has several names. And the reason why God has several names is because, like anyone has several names, I have several names. You might have several names. But also, every name is a specific character of God. For instance, when God is Elohim, that's God acting as Lord and Master of the universe. That's God being the creator. So Elohim means God, the creator. And I like to translate it simply as the Lord. When it's the Tetragrammaton, which is basically Y, H, V, H, right, in English, and obviously in Hebrew they would have their letters. The 10 utterances say, do not pronounce it, do not use the Lord's name in vain. Therefore, we follow that and we try to use generic names. Hashem means the name. So instead of just constantly using a name of God, that means when God is dealing between God and mankind. Then there's Kel Shakai, and that's going to come up when God is talking about possession of the land of Israel, etc., etc. And there are a few other names that come through, and those are the names that basically the Torah, the original Testament, the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, the prophets, the chronicles, they use for God. And we're going to translate them specifically. So when it says Elohim, I like to say the Lord, because it refers to the Creator. And when it's the Tetragrammaton, the 4-letter word, then I like to say Hashem, because that's like the Father of mankind. So I use the word Hashem. All right. I hope you join us in class 2.